Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to get started in just a minute. We'll let some more people join on, and then we'll get started. Thanks for joining us.
I'm in like the tiniest.
Okay, Jody, you want to get started?
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for joining us again tonight for our nutrition and fertility webinar. We are so grateful to have you. We have online right now Jenna Riley, who is more than happy to help set up a complimentary consultation with Dr. Nodler. If you would like, you can just tap in the sidebar here for Jenna, and you can also type in some questions, and Melanie and Dr. Nodler will address them. So any questions you have, just type them in and we'll get started. First, I have Dr. Nodler. He is our Med Center medical director. He sees patients at our Med Center, which is right next to the Women's Hospital of Texas, and he also sees patients at Memorial City. Go ahead, Dr. Nodler. Thank you.
Can everybody see me? I don't know if I can be seen and heard, but hopefully I can. Do I need to click something for that? No, probably. I think okay. Cool. So my name is Jamie Nodler. I'm an REI, so reproductive endocrinology and infertility. I'm one of our doctors at CCRM, which stands for Colorado Center of Reproductive Medicine. I'm guessing we probably have some folks joining us from Houston and maybe even from other places around the country. We're very, very happy to have you. We have our clinic in Houston, Texas, next to the medical center. We see all sorts of fertility patients. We see patients with PCOS, with endometriosis, multiple other conditions, and really, really happy tonight. Somebody says, can't see anything. It's just a spinning wheel. Hopefully they're just logging on. But who I have here tonight with me is Melanie Smith. And if you didn't know, this is National Infertility Awareness Week, and who better to have here than Melanie, because Melanie has been through everything, basically, and she can tell her story as well. But just to tell you briefly, I know a lot of you are struggling with things. Melanie had endometriosis, she had surgery, she took Clomid, she did IVF, but here's the great part of it. She has 3 babies who, you know, that's why we really appreciate Melanie being here tonight, because it's only 6:30 and it's bedtime for some of them, and she was still able to be here and join us, so we appreciate that. We liked Melanie so much as a patient that we hired her, and now she's a patient advocate for us and a patient care coordinator. She works here in our medical center office in Houston. She also has a big interest in nutrition and exercise, and so I wanted her to be here to tell us, you know, I can spout to you all day, you know, what I recommend when it comes to nutrition and trying to keep your body healthy. But Melanie's actually been through it, and she was a mom when she went through it for her second round of IVF, and she was busy and she was tired. And I'm going to let her tell you how she actually did the grocery store and accomplished it every day. So thank you so much, Melanie, for joining us.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm going to go over a few things, and what I wanted to do tonight is start by going over kind of my recommendations for nutrition, for what to add in, what to subtract, which is a lot of times even more important than what to add in, and we'll go over that a little bit more. And then what everybody loves is supplementation. We're going to talk about that too. And then I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth with Melanie on some kind of specific recommendations, maybe some recipes and things like that. We're going to try to make this 45 minutes, so we'll wrap by 7:15, including some questions, just so you know kind of what to expect. So just to start out with, what do I do and what do I kind of subscribe to on a daily basis? What we try to do at home is really this kind of Mediterranean diet. And what's the reason for that? There's a lot of data now that says for cardiovascular disease, but also for infertility, the best kind of overall diet, if you were to pick one, is a Mediterranean diet. And why is that? So this is almost like thinking back to, you know, if you lived in Italy on a farm 100 years ago, what would you and your family eat? Okay, so you'd fish out of the stream, you'd have a couple chickens at your place, you'd grow a nice healthy garden. And of course, we can't all do that, but what can you get at the grocery store? So lots of fruit and vegetables. So we want to make about half of our plate vegetables with any meal. And if you're just doing that, so I tell all my patients, you're killing it. You're doing so good if you can just do that. Nobody does that. I can't even do that with most meals, but I try really, really hard. So half your plate vegetables with any meal. And then what are we doing with the rest of our plate? A quarter of our plate, we want to make, our protein. And our protein, it's a lot of times, what are we subtracting as much as what we're adding? What I want to subtract is a lot of the red meats and things higher in saturated fat. There's reasons for that. We'll go over it. They're pro-inflammatory. Don't like them. What we want to have is fish and poultry. So ACOG, and Melanie's going to go over some specific recommendations here, but ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, actually recommends 2 to 3 servings of fish per week. Fish is really high in omega-3 fatty acids. It's anti-inflammatory. It's really good for you. Melanie's going to go over some kind of specific ones that we like. And poultry, so your turkey, your chicken, it's low in fat, it's high in protein, it's good for you. But don't leave out our plant-based proteins, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as well. We eat a lot of plant-based protein in our house. I think it's good. If you can do that even a couple days a week, what are we talking about here? We're talking about tofu. Some people can experiment with tempeh as another soy product. Beans, lentils, those kind of things. A lot of people, this is Texas where I live, we're really big on red meat, our cow products, pork, things like that. People love it. It tastes delicious. I agree, but not really good for our bodies. Other things that are good are going to be kind of our polyunsaturated or monounsaturated fatty acids. The polyunsaturated are like your omega-3s and omega-6s. Monounsaturated is going to be like olive oil, your vegetable oils, things like that. If you eat a diet like this, with the other quarter of your plate being whole grains, and that's important too, they have antioxidant properties, you're going to have a lower chance of infertility, decreased chance of miscarriage. There's very good data on this, and we're going to go over some of the specifics here as well. We're going to worry about, so that's what we want to do, right? What do we want to have? We want to do something akin to that Mediterranean diet if you're looking for a diet. What do we want to decrease? We want to decrease the antibiotics, the pesticides, the growth hormones, all these kind of things in our diets, and they're there, and we're going to talk about some specific ways to do that. What I like to think about is kind of breaking our food down into a couple groups. We've got our carbs, we've got our fats, and we've got our proteins, okay? So when we're thinking about carbs, carbs can be good and bad, okay? So especially for our PCOS patients, that's that polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I see we've already got a PCOS question, so we'll definitely get to that. With PCOS, we definitely want to be lower on our carbs, and there's reasons for that. So especially in PCOS patients can't process blood sugar correctly. It's almost like having a diabetes, okay? So what happens with PCOS also is the ovarian androgens, so those male hormones like testosterone, they go too high. And when those levels go high, it makes it so that the brain hormones, FSH and LH, they can't stimulate the ovaries to grow eggs correctly. So we always hear about in PCOS, those women don't ovulate. And part of that is the carbohydrates. So if you have a lot of carbohydrates, you can't break them down correctly, you're actually increasing your ovarian androgen production. You're increasing that testosterone production, which is the opposite of what we want, okay? And in PCOS patients, carbs stick to them like glue. And so they're going to get stored as fat, more androgens form, and it's kind of this vicious cycle. In our PCOS patients, if they cut carbs, if they can lose weight, and sometimes we add another medication called metformin to help with that as well, that sometimes is the only treatment they need to become pregnant, which is pretty cool. So nutrition alone for that population specifically, can get some benefit. Now, for our non-PCOS patients, I think that carbs can be good, right? But you want to choose the correct carbs. So we're looking for whole grains, because when we talk about carbohydrates, there's what we call glycemic index, which basically means how much work does your body have to do to break down that carbohydrate. So we want something that it takes your body more energy to break down. So if you have a pixie stick, right, that's the opposite. That's like straight sugar. It's completely refined. They're delicious, yes, I know, but not as good for your body versus whole grains. So we're thinking about, we call it like your cereal grains, which you can see. So you can get your quinoa, your barleys, your brown rice, your wild rice, things like that. They taste delicious. Trust me. I grew up on a very like Midwestern diet. My mom's from Ohio. We never had anything like that, but I've learned to cook it and eat it as an adult. They can actually have beneficial properties. They can give you more energy, so having some carbohydrates, and also they're really high in antioxidants. So you're gonna hear me say the word antioxidant a lot. It's anti-inflammatory, which is gonna help with infertility, okay? So carbs can be good. So I'm not a big fan, I hear it all the time, of this keto diet or these cleanses or things like that. You want something that you can actually stick with long term. So so those are some grains that I like that can be beneficial. Then talking just briefly about fats. So again, fats are important, and I'm going to let Melanie talk about fats and her experience with that as well. But you know, with our fats, there's different types. So we've all heard about this. Fortunately, we don't hear a lot about the trans fats anymore. Most of those have been outlawed by US government. That's what you used to find in, you know, some of your fried foods, some of your ultra processed foods. It kept foods good for a really long time, like your cinnamon bun that you get at the grocery store that's good for like 15 years, not good for your body. We don't have to talk about that as much anymore, but still your saturated fats, not good for you, okay? So you're gonna still find saturated fats in your red meat, your pork, bacon, things like that. Very much inflammatory and not good for our bodies. Like I said before, the monounsaturated and the polyunsaturated fats, that's what we wanna go for, those omega-3s and omega-6s that you hear about all the time. These are actually important because your body uses these as an energy source for embryo development. So for our patients who are trying with Clomid or they're trying for IVF or whatever, we need energy to grow our eggs and our embryos. And so that's important. They're also a precursor for our steroid hormones. So if you haven't heard of steroid hormones before, you've heard of estrogen, you've heard of progesterone. These are building blocks for those. So if you don't have those fats, you know, you're not going to be able to grow those hormones correctly. Okay, so what we're wanting to do is definitely eat some of those fats, several servings a day, and actually get a good benefit. And here's a good time. Let me just hop over to Melanie real quick, because you know, we talk a lot about our patients that are overweight and obese, and yes, being overweight and obese can definitely affect our chances of fertility. Being obese definitely affects egg quality and embryo quality. But what's important also is some of our patients say, you know what, Dr. Nadler, I'm killing it with this stuff. I have the best diet. I exercise so much. I haven't eaten a carb in 12 years. And that leads me to Melanie and our first new consult. So Melanie and I met in CrossFit, just so you know. So we are both super into fitness and nutrition and things like that. And what I have to remind people about is you can actually be too fit. You can have too good of a diet, and you can and that can actually be negative as well. So the studies say actually you need these fats, you need some carbs, because if you are too thin, you actually have even worse fertility outcomes than our obese patients, believe it or not. So, you know, Melanie, tell us for a second kind of about your experience with that, and what were some of the things you did, because I'm sure there's people on here who had trouble actually being too thin, or, you know, not having a balanced diet, and what are your kind of thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I actually was weighing and measuring my food. So I had this macro counter, and I was like, I'm going to do this right. I'm eating so many vegetables. I'm, you know, making sure I'm having all my lean meats, eating fish, all of the above. But what I definitely wasn't having was a lot of fat. And I, you know, when Dr. Nadler and I had our meet, he was like, you know, you could be too fit, too thin. And I was like, no, I'm fine, because I actually, I weigh this much, and, you know, this is okay. And I have this amount of muscle. But what I didn't realize was that my muscle to fat ratio was like off. So I started incorporating more of like nut butters, eating a little bit more of like the really nutrient dense type foods. So avocado, I started adding my avocado in. It was definitely a little alarming to have to sit there and say, okay, let me gain this weight before I gain more weight to tack on to try and get pregnant. But it was definitely something that helped me shift my mindset of how I was eating my food, and ensuring that I was fueling my body appropriately so that I could have a little bit more fat on my body to sustain a pregnancy.
Yeah, and Melanie will tell you as well, when we started out, she was not having regular cycles, definitely having irregular menses. And we've all heard stories about, your college athlete or your runner, your people that's really stressed having irregular cycles. And I've seen it countless times where we have patients gain a little bit of weight, a little bit of fat, and sometimes that brings back some menstrual cycles, and it's all we need. So that's an important, topic as well. And then I really wanted to touch on protein. So protein is one that, again, here in Texas, we love our meat. And people get, in my opinion, a little bit protein crazy. They think, well, how could I ever eat a plant-based diet? How could I ever, have a diet like you guys are talking about when I'm not going to get protein from vegetables, which is totally untrue. You can get all the protein you need, and you really probably don't need as much protein as you think you do. And what I'm saying there is, like we talked about at the beginning, if you have your meat product on your plate, I want that to be really no more than a quarter of your plate. Like, again, about half of your plate to be vegetables, about a quarter to be whole grains. And when we're having our meat, I usually say, and this is even for men, so maybe even a little bit smaller for women, no larger than fist size. That's usually a good kind of indicator, because if you go to a restaurant, if you go to a Cheesecake Factory or something like that, you're going to get a piece of meat that is this big, and it's going to be about 80% of your plate, and they put 2 little pieces of broccoli on it, and they call that, a balanced meal. So that's why we have to be really careful about eating out. So when we're having our proteins, there's a few different things that we want to think about. So first, like I said, fish I think is really good and really important if you like fish. There are a lot of good fish products out there, 2 to 3 a week. And Melanie, I'll hop over to you for a second, and maybe you can talk about some of the different fish and some of the recommendations behind that.
Yeah, so it's not really in color, but that's okay. You can actually look up this wonderful little chart that is like a little cheat sheet, so you can see the different types of fish that you could be consuming that could actually support this kind of diet. So thinking of the kind of like your salmons, your scallops, shrimp, something a little bit smaller, tilapia, like your everyday fish, actually is like a really great choice to have 2 to 3 servings a week. Things to type of avoid are like the very large fish in the sea, if you will, with the highest mercury levels. So you're talking about like swordfish, marlin, tuna, big eye. So trying to stay away from like those type of fish so that you are limiting your consumption of mercury in that sense is actually really good way to mix into your diet.
And so, because that's a question that I get pretty frequently is, people say, well, I'm trying to get pregnant, or I am pregnant. So even in pregnancy, these things are good. Now, we do want to avoid, your raw fish, so you don't get to eat sushi in pregnancy, which isn't fair. But this chart that Melanie was just showing, you can Google mercury levels in fish and just click images, and you'll see it a million times on your screen. I think it's really helpful because it'll tell you the green light fish, the yellow light, the red light. And so the green light, which Melanie mentioned, like your salmon, your cod, pretty much everything you're typically going to pick up at a grocery store, 2 to 3 servings a week, you do not have to worry about mercury levels. And then there's some others that are 1 serving a week, and that's some of the like yellowfin tuna, but like Melanie said, your bigger predators, that's what you're typically going to want to avoid. So I wouldn't be concerned about the mercury levels as much as some of our patients are. So that one is good, and I like that a lot. And the other one that I want to point out here and spend a second on is soy. Like we said before, all of our patients are nervous about soy. So soy, yes, it can be a phytoestrogen, and that's something that you hear about all the time, and you'll read about that online. And people have been scared about soy for fertility purposes for years and years and years. But again, you have to remember, if you're adding something, are you also subtracting something? Okay, so remember, if you're adding in like tofu, for example, in your diet, and you're maybe taking away even chicken or beef or another animal product, there's a lot of pesticides and growth hormones and antibiotics and all sorts of nasty stuff in our meat supply nowadays. And I'll touch on this when we talk about male infertility in a minute. I think it's super interesting. that maybe you're replacing those with a soy product that doesn't have as many of those exposures to your body. And so there's actually been recent studies that shown that that assisted reproductive technologies, so that's Clomid, that's IUI, that's IVF, that's all these things, actually have a higher likelihood of working in people with higher amounts of dietary soy, so tofu and other products like that. We have a dish we make at home all the time that I really like. Super simple. We do it on weeknights. Just a little bit of tofu sauteed in a cast iron skillet. We do it with some broccoli, with some mushrooms. We put a little bit of brown rice in there. It's a really good meal. You get your protein. You don't have as much, animal fat exposure. Nice balanced diet. We double up the broccoli on it because my girls like broccoli a lot, but also because we try to get our veggies in. So protein, yes, it's important. No, I don't want you to make it your entire diet, because I hear people, CrossFitters, me and Melanie know, that think that a good diet is eating like 8 slices of bacon and no carbs and great, we did it. No, that diet's super high in saturated fat. It's very pro-inflammatory. Yes, it's low in carbs, but I don't think that that's good for your body, so I would not recommend that. And so those are a couple of the main food groups we want to think about. And then briefly, just to touch on male fertility and male diet. So my guys typically have really bad diets. I had a new consult today. You see these guys with low morphology, which is like the shape of the sperm. And a lot of times that's lifestyle related. And all I have to do is start talking to our guys. How's your diet? How much are you drinking? How much caffeine? Do you smoke? This and that and the other. And we typically find the culprit. So for guys, they are going to be important here as well. What I found really interesting is there's a study released a couple years ago that's shown a progressive decreased trend in male sperm concentration over the years. So if you look back from the 1970s till now, there's been a 50 to 60% decrease in sperm concentration. That's how many millions of sperm there are in a normal sample. 50 to 60%, that's a huge decrease. And why is that? We think it's what we're exposed to, the chemicals we're exposed to every day, the toxins we put into our bodies every day. But what I think a lot of it is our food supply. It's our food supply, and that the meat we used to eat didn't have so much garbage in it. The vegetables weren't sprayed with as much garbage. And so it's really important to think about that. And so that's a good little segue for Melanie again here. When we're talking about fruits and vegetables, especially, we always talk about chemicals and pesticides, but the first question I get from people all the time is, well, I don't want to buy everything at Whole Foods. It gets really expensive. What should we buy organic? What, maybe can we buy conventional? Here in Texas, again, we have HEB. You can find your good stuff. So Melanie, what are the recommendations we have for that?
So you can look through the Clean 15. Is that what it's called? Clean 15?
Clean 15.
Okay. I always get the 15 in the clean mix.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can look up something on that. So basically anything that is like a banana or something that has some kind of peel on those, that's kind of covered, oranges, anything like that is something that that has a less pesticides, I guess, sprayed on it, or on them. When you're looking at your berries, your strawberries, things that are more exposed, those are the ones that you're going to kind of want to shift over to the organic side, and maybe filter that in and with organic products, so that you're not having to have a ton of pesticides that are sprayed onto it, because they're the most effective and kind of harder. They're a little bit harder to clean when you get home and try and wash them off. So that's something that you'll want to spend on that end for the more organic stuff.
Yeah. And so, so exactly like Melanie said, you can Google this, and I like it. Every single year it gets updated, and I always find it really interesting. And because I had to kind of struggle to tell my wife when we first started looking at this, hey, I really want to shop organic. Here's the things that are important. So you can look up, just Google Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. And when you look at those, every year, the Dirty Dozen, those are going to be kind of the dirtiest, most pesticide-ridden foods that you're going to find. The ones that are always on the top of the list are things like strawberries, blackberries, spinach, kale, so grapes. Yeah, so it's things you'd think of being good for you, right? But if you're buying non-organic, these are sprayed with all sorts of garbage, and I will not eat those in our house. I'd rather eat an orange, you know, a conventional orange, rather than some of these berries. You hear all the time about berries being so good and antioxidants and this and that and the other. I personally don't recommend them if you're not buying them organically, which can be expensive, but that's why also buy seasonally, right? So when it's the summer and there's tons of strawberries and the organic ones are on sale for $2 a pound, I freeze them. And you know, we buy a bunch of them, and I eat them over time. And if you buy seasonal foods, a lot of times they can be less expensive if you're going for the organic ones. But like Melanie said, there's also a clean 15. Most of these are going to be things that you can take a peel off of, because then they're not going to be as exposed to some of these you know, pesticides and chemicals. And so for our guys specifically, we want to be, again, trying to decrease the saturated fats. That's the biggest one. Most of our guys eat way too much meat. And then some vitamins that have shown to be helpful for them is vitamin C and E, and then folic acid, which is the same as what we're going to see in a prenatal multivitamin, and we'll talk about that in a second. Also, Mediterranean diet has been shown in multiple studies to be beneficial for guys. And then just to pop over to some of the questions, several of them are about supplements, and that's everyone's favorite thing. But before we get to supplements, I want to talk about my favorite thing. And my favorite thing is toxins, okay? So way more important than supplements are your diet, because study after study after study after study has said, yes, we need all these wonderful things that I just told you about, your omega-3s, your omega-6s, your vitamins, your you know, your vitamin D, your vitamin E, all these kind of things. Study after study has shown unequivocally, if you get these things through your diet, they will be helpful, not only for fertility, but for cardiovascular health, for everyday health, for everything, okay? If you take them as supplements, they are much less effective. There is no question about that, okay? So what I like to do first is diet, diet, diet. If you're gonna spend your money on anything, spend it on better food, okay? Skip, you know, the fast food restaurants, skip some of the non-organic foods, spend your money there. That is where data and study after study has shown can be most effective. And then number two, after you've spent your money on your diet, look at what you're already putting in your body every single day. So when I talk about toxins, I'm talking about alcohol, caffeine, smoking, things like that, okay? Caffeine, there's been several good studies to show that women who have greater than about 200 to 250 milligrams of caffeine a day, which you can get pretty good with one big cup of Starbucks, have lower fertility outcomes, okay? So lower fertility outcomes, potentially even higher miscarriage rates. So we tell people maximum 1 cup of coffee a day, and if you can make it lower than that, even better. Green tea is better than coffee. It's got less caffeine in it. It's got more antioxidants. And if you can go decaf, or you can go to herbal teas or things like that, even better, okay? Because I have patients all the time that are on 4 or 5 cups of coffee a day. Not awesome, okay? Alcohol, a little bit of alcohol can be okay. You know, I say usually max 2 to 3 drinks a week while we're trying for pregnancy. We have patients who have 2 to 3 drinks a night, okay? And that amount of alcohol, your body turns it into simple carbs, like we talked about, that glycemic index before. It gets stored as fat. It's not good fat. It's not good for your body, okay? And on top of that, what one of the trainers at our gym used to always say, and everyone's realized this, when we have the alcohol, you lose inhibition, okay? So, you know, if you wouldn't have had a whole bag of Peeps, then you have a couple drinks, and then a whole bag of Peeps maybe sounds more reasonable, because we just had Easter. So, you know, that's something to think about, is if you're trying really hard on your diet, it's harder to stick on your diet when you're drinking. So something to think about there. Smoking, no question, cannot smoke. Don't do it. Not only is it not good for your lungs, but also we've seen that it decreases IVF pregnancy outcomes by 50%, 50, and increases your risk of miscarriage by 25%. Also, it's going to lower your egg count. It will lower your AMH, which is not good. So when you come in and you have very few eggs left and you're smoking, I'm going to have to do this. Not going to be happy. So good. Okay, now finally we can get to supplements. So supplements, I've already given you my kind of spiel on that. Someone asked a question about the book, It Starts with the Egg. They love the supplements, and it starts with the egg. Like I said, I don't think they're bad for you, but I also don't think that they're as good as they tout. And if you look at the data behind it, it backs up what I'm saying. And I'll tell you, you can Google it. I've done several supplement studies looking specifically at vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids, specifically for endometriosis patients, which again is an inflammatory disease, and we want to reduce inflammation for fertility. And what our studies, several of them have showed as well, is that if you get these supplements, these nutrients from your diet, it is beneficial. Vitamin D and omega-3 specifically. Or vitamin D you can get from sunlight as well. We get about 80% of our vitamin D from sunlight. If you take them, probably doesn't help that much. Now, I don't think that they hurt. The only one that we've seen is a definite yes. That's the prenatal multivitamin. There's multiple reasons for this. The biggest thing is folate or folic acid. Now, the studies will say we want between 400 to 800 micrograms of folic acid in your prenatal multivitamin. So I don't really care what brand you buy. Go to Costco, go to CVS, whatever, just take it, okay? I typically go with nature-made supplements. They're not that expensive. They're pretty good. That's where I'm gonna go. And again, I'm gonna spend more of my money on better food. That's what I would recommend. So folic acid, not only is it important for fetal spinal column development, which we all want that, it also has been shown to increase fertility outcomes. So IVF pregnancy success rates in one study were shown to be 16% higher in patients that took folic acid. So definitely do that, no question. The other ones that I typically recommend if you're going to take them are omega-3 fatty acids. That's going to be 1 to 2 grams a day of omega-3 fatty acids. I usually get, again, the Nature Made Ultra Mini. I'm not on staff with Nature Made. It's just what I personally take because they're very, very small and they're not those huge pills, and they're what they call burpless, which means they don't make your stomach upset, and which no one likes. And then vitamin D, that's another one. Is going to be 2,000 to 4,000 IU or international units a day. That's totally fine to take, but even better is get some sunlight. So again, we get 80% of our vitamin D from sun exposure. Wear a tank top. It's really nice in Houston right now. Go for a walk for 10, 20 minutes, and that will increase your vitamin D level in and of itself. The other ones that we talk about, especially for our older patients, 35 plus, are CoQ10. So that's CO, letter Q, number 10, coenzyme Q10. It has been shown in some very small studies to potentially improve egg quality. That's going to be 200 milligrams 3 times a day. And then the last one is acai berry extract. That's the thing you always hear about. They put in smoothies and things like that. We did an internal study here at CCRM, which showed better IVF outcomes in patients that were taking 600 milligrams of acai a day. We sell it through our clinic. You can, that's the only one we sell through our clinic because I don't like to push vitamins, because the only reason we do is because it can be sometimes hard to find. Also you can find it on Amazon if you want to do that as well. So that's a lot of what I have for you. I know that I'm guessing I'm gonna get this question, so I'm just gonna answer right now. I'm not huge on DHEA. It's a precursor to progesterone. I don't like progesterone levels to go higher early especially in IVF stim, so it's not my favorite one. But those are my thoughts about supplements. Somebody just asked about myo-inositol. There are some there are some patients with PCOS that have had better outcomes and have more cycle regularity when they take that. So I do like that too, especially for PCOS. And I was just gonna pause for a second and let Melanie give you an idea of, again, how did she do it when she was going through her IVF journey? How did she go to the grocery store, and what are some kind of thoughts she has there? And then I'll pop back to last of these questions.
Okay, so you sat down in the office. Dr. Nadler just told you all the things. You hear all the other information. What do I do now? So a couple of resources, or let's start with grocery shopping. So really simple, really easy. The way I kind of started shopping was basically shopping around the outer perimeter of the grocery store. So making sure that you are hitting your produce, that you're hitting your meats, and you're kind of going throughout and trying to stay away from all the processed foods. So attempting to, it doesn't have to be, I know it doesn't have to be difficult in the sense that you're like doing these gourmet meals every single day. I am the queen of making it as easy as possible because we're just always running around in our house. So I go to Trader Joe's and buy like an already pre-made, like just plain Jane stir fry that you can add different seasonings to. There's a cauliflower rice one that is absolutely delicious. It is on stock in our freezer at all times, so that if we need to throw something in, we have it. So different stir fries that are frozen. There are several different offerings in this book called Real Foods for Pregnancy, and it has really great recipes that are really simple and easy to do. We also recommend Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy, that also has several recipes in them that are super simple. And then just in general, for general reading about fertility, the Fertility Diet is also another book that would be really great to read through and just kind of understand why and what Dr. Nodler is saying in the sense of eating cleaner foods and going towards what you're actually putting into your body, and not being supported by all the supplements and getting kind of wrapped up in that. With that being said, I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. I love sweets, and I have to really like keep myself off of them as much as possible. What I would honestly tap into, as well as like your intuitive eating. So when you're hungry, eat. Sit down, think about what you're eating. Try not to eat mindlessly. Try and look at your food and actually eat it, not eat while you're doing 100 different things at one time. Listen to your body. Think about what you just ate and how it made you feel. Do you feel tired? Did you eat too much? Thinking on just making it as simple as possible. And then, having that occasional treat if you really, really need it. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have, is just making sure that you are thinking about fueling your body and not obsessing about what you're putting into it, but just thinking that I'm fueling my body now to attempt for pregnancy, for fertility, and attempting to eat like as clean as you can.
Yeah. So thanks, Melanie. That's awesome. And totally agree with that. What I like that Melanie said also is, be kind to yourself, and it's okay if you don't eat the perfect thing every time. Trust me, Melanie is with me in the office and knows that I like chocolate, dark chocolate, but I do like chocolate a lot, and so it's hard for me to stay away from it. But couple other questions that people have asked: would prenatal pills be enough instead of multiple supplements? I think so, honestly. And for any of my patients who are on this, I don't push the supplements a ton because, again, the data is not super strong on them. And again, I know the data because I've done some of the studies. I think definitely you need to take a prenatal multivitamin. And if all you want to do is try to eat clean and eat lots of vegetables, I totally support that. And then other thoughts that I've gotten are thoughts on L-Carnitine. I haven't seen many good studies supporting that. The myo-inositol is one specifically that I have seen. I actually have had patients have success on that vitamin, whether it was because they were taking that supplement or because at the same time they were changing their diet, who's to say, but I haven't had a lot of experience with L-Carnitine, so I don't really advocate for that one. Certain vegetables or fruits people with PCOS should avoid. I like that question a lot. Vegetables, really no. Yes, you can have some vegetables that have carbohydrate qualities, especially maybe your tomatoes, your carrots, things like that are going to have beets are going to have a little bit more sugar in them. But honestly, if that's the worst you're doing so good. I'm not, you're killing it if we're worried about the carrot, So fruit is one we do have to watch, right? So the big things we're going to watch in PCOS are your processed carbs. So that's your bread, pasta, tortilla, white rice, mashed potatoes, desserts, and then a big culprit for a lot of people is sweet drinks. Okay, that's your any kind of sweetened drink, even if it's fake sugars. I don't really like those. So those are the ones I want you to watch first and foremost. But fruit can be a big one too. I've had some women that have weight problems with PCOS, and they say, look, doc, I'm a vegan, all I eat is fruit and vegetables. And they eat, just tons of fruit, which is all sugar. Remember, and for some patients, that may be okay, but remember, we also want to have some of those fats, and we need to be eating a lot of vegetables as well. So with PCOS, we do want to turn it down on the sugar because, like I said, it's almost like having a pre-diabetes. Your body cannot process them correctly. It's not fair. I always say If you eat a piece of bread and your girlfriend who doesn't have PCOS eats a piece of bread, it's going to stick to you like glue and not to her. Again, totally unfair, but it is what it is, and we just have to work with it. And then I'm trying to see any other questions. Here's one. Foods that actually help implantation improve the lining. Not specifically, but again, lining can a lot of times go with being underweight. I've had several patients that, you know, over-exercise and don't eat appropriately. They're too thin. They can have what you call hypothalamic amenorrhea. A lot of times these patients don't grow linings appropriately, and even with IVF, even when we stimulate their ovaries, we grow lots of eggs, we make embryos, sometimes they have trouble with lining growth. So for that, what I would say is really balance, balance, balance. You need to make sure that you're eating an appropriate amount of carbohydrates with your whole grains. You want to make sure you're eating a good amount of good fats. Then there's some other little tricks we do for lining growth as well. Acupuncture, that's a whole nother talk on wellness, but there's some small studies that say that acupuncture may improve blood flow to the uterus, may help lining growth as well. But for lining growth, I would just say balance, balance, balance. So look at that Mediterranean diet, half your plate vegetables, quarter lean protein, quarter whole grains. You're doing really, really good. I'm trying to see any other questions that we haven't addressed. Fertility supplements you should be avoiding if you have fibroids. No, not specifically either. There's not a lot of data on fibroids and supplementation. What we see more is supplementation for endometriosis. You're going to see, you know, thing after thing on that. And like I said, we did a big study, a randomized trial, where we randomized women to 6 months of omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, or a placebo, like basically a sugar pill for 6 months. And our main outcome was pain with endometriosis. And what we found is that there was no difference at all between placebo, vitamin D, and omega-3 with 6 months of intervention. So again, I don't think that they're harmful for, we're talking about endometriosis specifically, but I can't also tell you in a well-done study, and I feel like ours was well done, that they have a large impact as well. So with that note, probiotics, one last. There's not a lot of data on that for fertility. Again, I think that gut health is important, but my best way to improve gut health is vegetables. Again, you'll hear me say it till I'm blue in the face. You know, I'd throw probiotics more into kind of the fad category a little bit. I want to pretend like I'm a Italian farmer. That's my dream one day, maybe in retirement. I'm an Italian farmer that lived 100 years ago, and you know, he's not focused on juice cleanse or you know, things like that. He's eating a balanced diet, lots of vegetables, you know, healthy organic proteins in appropriate proportions, and whole grains. That's you know, I'll say it over and over and over again, but that's where the money is. And so on that note, I think we'll wrap it up today. We'd love to have you in clinic. You can meet Melanie and I in person. If you're joining us from another spot, fortunately, we have CCRM clinics all over the country, and you can you know, check us out at any of those. We have lots of great docs. I think that there is someone on if you want to schedule a new consult with. You know, love to answer any other questions, and thank you and good night.
Thank you, Dr. Nodler. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you all for joining so much. Again, Jen Riley's email is off to the side if you'd like to schedule a consultation. And then if you have any more questions with fertility, nutrition, I put Melanie's email. She's happy to return your emails. And if there's anything else, just let us know. We're so happy you joined us. Thank you.